Once upon a time, there was a king who was deeply saddened by the death of his beloved queen. He sat sorrowfully in the midst of a dense and mysterious forest. This forest wasn't far from his palace, yet the veil of grief over his eyes made him unaware of where he had wandered. Unknowingly, he had entered the land of a dangerous and cunning sorceress, whose tales of terror made people shudder. Excellent, she thought. He still remembers his queen. This is a perfect opportunity for me to gain power. The sorceress transformed herself into a beautiful maiden. In an instant, the king fell deeply in love with her. He immediately decided to take her back to his palace, and that very day, he married her. But this stepmother, who was actually a sorceress, was not kind to the king's children. She despised them intensely and spent her days and nights inciting the king against them. Fly away into this world as royal swans and find your own path, she commanded. Unfortunately, the king's 11 sons, who were in the garden at that time, fell under the spell and turned into royal swans. Eliza, who was standing in another part of the garden, escaped the sorceress's notice and remained unaffected by the magic. Horrified, she watched as her brothers transformed into swans. She tried to follow them, but they soared high above the forest and soon vanished from sight. Elisa called out their names, but it was no use. All she had left was a single feather, yet she held on to hope that one day her brothers would return. She took shelter in a nearby cave, waiting and hoping. Days passed into years, but her brothers did not return. Had taken refuge in a distant lake. One evening, Elisa stood on the beach, sad and alone, when she saw a flock of swans flying toward her. As they landed, moonlight touched their feathers, and they transformed back into handsome young princes. They were her beloved brothers. They told her that they turned into swans by day, but could regain their human form under the moonlight. The 11 brothers decided to take their sister with them. They wove a net from willow bark through the night. As dawn broke, and they turned back into swans, they seated Elisa in the net and flew with her into the skies. Their journey was long and difficult as they reached their destination before nightfall. Yet they continued without rest. By evening, they safely arrived and comforted Elisa, assuring her that she would be safe in a nearby cave surrounded by stinging nettles. These plants, with their painful thorns and slight poison, would protect the cave from wild animals and other dangers. They promised to visit her each night. One night, a fairy appeared in the dense forest and spoke to Elisa. You can still save your brothers if you have courage and patience, but to break the spell, you must gather stinging nettles either from outside your cave or from graveyards. These plants will prick and wound your hands, yet this is the only way. You must weave 11 shirts for your brothers from the nettles and place them on their wings. But remember, you must not utter a single word during this time, or your brothers will die forever. Elisa did exactly as the fairy instructed. She gathered the nettles, crushed them with her bare hands, and though her fingers bled, she did not give up. She spun thread from the nettles and began weaving shirts with great care and love for her brothers. One afternoon, a prince came to the forest to hunt. He spotted a beautiful, healthy deer and quickly aimed his bow and arrow. But as soon as the deer noticed him, it fled, and the prince chased it deeper into the forest, arriving near a cave where the deer vanished into thick bushes. Curious, the prince peeked into the cave and saw a stunningly beautiful princess, silently sewing a coat from prickly thread. Captivated, he watched her intently, wondering who she was. The prince tried several times to talk to her, asking who she was and why she was alone in this deserted forest. But the girl remained silent, focused on her work, never uttering a word. Her quietness intrigued him even more, and her beauty and innocence touched his heart. In the end, the prince gently helped her onto his horse. She sat quietly behind him as they rode out of the forest together toward the palace. After arriving at the palace, Elisa was given a grand room with every comfort. Though for her, the most important things were the coats she was making, She continued to sew them quietly day and night, completely devoted to her task of saving her brothers. Meanwhile, the prince's curiosity and admiration for her grew, yet her silence and unwavering focus only added to her mystery. One day, an old woman came to the palace under the guise of visiting the prince. She was in fact the same sorceress who was their stepmother. "Your Majesty," she said slyly, "do not be deceived by this girl's beauty and silence. She still sits in her room, sewing coats from thorny plants. Who else but a witch would engage in such strange work? I know you may not believe me now, but time will reveal the truth." As Elisa was finishing her 7th coat, she suddenly ran out of the thorny plants. Fear gripped her heart, for she knew she had to complete the remaining 4 coats to save her brothers. Determined, she snuck out of the palace under the cover of night, careful to avoid being seen, and made her way to the graveyard in search of more plants. Unbeknownst to her, the witch, disguised as an old woman, was secretly watching her. The witch smirked, pleased with the thought that her plan might finally succeed. "See, Your Majesty," she said, reporting back to the prince, "this girl is a witch. Why else would she be roaming in a graveyard at night? Guards, arrest her and throw her into the dungeon." Elisa was thrown into a dark dungeon, accused of witchcraft. But even in the dim cell, she never gave up hope. She continued sewing with the few thorny plants she had left, her fingers bruised and bleeding, but her heart resolute. She worked tirelessly, believing that one day the curse would break and her brothers would be free. Again, the king's council, swayed by the witch's accusations, sentenced Elisa to death. On the day of her execution, townsfolk jeered and hurled insults at her as she was led to the square. Elisa, however, stayed silent, focused on completing the 11th coat. By then, she had already finished 10 coats, and with unwavering dedication, she worked on the final one. A crowd had gathered, eager to witness the burning of the supposed witch. Just as she finished the last stitch, 11 swans appeared in the sky above. Elisa quickly threw each magical coat over her brothers, and in that instant, the curse was broken. The swans transformed back into their human forms, astonishing everyone present. Elisa then explained everything to the prince, who, filled with remorse, apologized to her. Overwhelmed by her bravery and love, he asked for her forgiveness and soon married her, beginning a life of happiness together. As for the witch, knowing the prince would seek revenge, she vanished, never to return.